down to the last 3 strips that we have to put on the top of the forebeam. So almost done. I'm gonna mix up some epoxy and we'll get 2 of these put on, 1 on each side here. So there'll be 1 here that we're gonna do first, and then we'll put 1 on the other side. And that will get us down to the final board, which we'll also do today. So this is gonna be completely epoxied by the end of today. So 2 before lunch, 1 after lunch. So Brian's starting from one end, I'm starting from the other, and we'll meet somewhere in the middle. Yesterday we got our final wood strip put in, and because it was in the center right here, we couldn't use any clamps, so instead we screwed down all these blocks to raise and lower the levels of it to get a nice smooth spot on there. So this is all set up, so we'll be taking these blocks off and we'll just fill the holes with resin on there. But this is all finally complete now, and today we're going to pull the top piece off because it's not actually epoxied onto the bottom piece yet, and take this off, and we'll be able to sand the top portion and sand the interior of it so that we can start putting the carbon fiber onto the interior of this beam. And then the very next step after that is going to be to put the bulkhead that goes all the way down the center of this thing to give it some support from here. And for that, we're going to have to buy some marine plywood and do some special forms and such to get it to fit correctly in here. But we'll show you all that in the next week or so. But right now, it's time to pull these blocks and get to some sanding and start preparing the interior of this forebeam. And then after we get it all sealed up with the bulkhead inside, we'll sand the entire outside and wrap it in carbon fiber as well. And then this will be finished so we can get it off these pads and get ready for our canoe to flip over onto its cradles right here. So that's what we're gonna get to today. As you can see, these blocks come off very easily with the plastic underneath. It just peels right off. Leaves a little residue, but there's lots of that we're gonna have to sand off. So no big deal. Okay, now that the blocks are out, we're removing all of the screws that hold it together since they're all epoxied now. And we'll get all these out. We also have to break loose all these washers because they're slightly epoxied on in some cases, but they come off pretty easy. All right, time to peel off the top. Just coming off pretty easily, thanks to our tape. And we're off. So we're putting the 2x4s in to raise the outer edge so that we can get the sanders to them. It gives us a little rise here so that we can get the sander in here to do a little sanding before we move this. I'm not going to try and do 100%, but we'll get a little bit of the all this crap that's out here. We'll get that off, and then we'll worry about a finer sanding of it at another point because we want to flip this over and work on the inside of this as well. But before we even get to the sanding, next thing we're going to do is fill all of these holes with epoxy. So a little round of epoxy work here to get all these holes sealed up, and then we'll get to sanding. Well, on second thought, what we decided to do is clean up the major stuff here with a quick sand before we fill the holes, just so we can get to it a little easier, and then we'll do a full sand of it after that. This is all smoothed off now, so we can see the holes really well to fix. Also where there were some gaps because of those blocks that we had to screw in here. Couldn't get underneath them real easily, so we'll have to sand a little bit and fill that. But other than that, it's all looking very good. This isn't the final sanding, of course. We're going to take and do a smoother sanding than a disc sander. So we'll do some more sanding on this, but this knocked off all of the sharp globs that would bother us. And so at this point, this is ready for filling, and then once we do that, we'll give it a quick sand after that, and we'll flip this over and start working on the inside. What I have to do is sand out all this squeeze out, and then do some filling, and then we'll be able to put in the carbon fiber later. But we'll start by taking the sanding in this flat part, and then we'll move these end parts out here somewhere where we can reach them easy. But right now this is stable enough that we can do the inside of it for sanding right now. So let's take a look at what I'm doing right now. So here's where I've sanded so far, between these two screw holes here, and a little bit this direction, but this is mostly it. So you can see that it's coming out very, very nice. There are a few gaps that we will have to sand, and a couple little knots like that we'll have to fill. So we'll get it all nicely rough sanded through this whole thing, so it'll go from looking like this to looking like this, and then we'll do a fill of any gaps anywhere, and then resand it again after that. Also, there's like a gap along from this board, but we don't want to lose this edge, because this edge is what bonds the other bottom half. So instead of trying to sand this back and losing this edge, we'll just fill this in with thickened epoxy to get this smooth along this inner edge right there. All right, so I've got everywhere in the middle part here all done. This is just excess stuff here, but I wiped this off. You can see that this is all nice and smooth now. Just a few gaps, particularly on the last board that we put in, because not easy to deal with that. But so everywhere from where the curve starts up there to where it goes down there. So next thing we're gonna have to do is put this in a different position so that I can get to these two ends here and sand them off, because this was the easy part, the big flat part in the middle. They just sit here nicely, but we'll have to move this now. The simple answer for us, just set it on the ground, and we braced it over here against these pallets and put a couple clamps there, and now I can do this end piece, and then we'll just reverse it around and put that end over here, you know, when I want to get to that in a few minutes. So on to sanding. We have finished sanding the entire interior of this, go all the way, and we've vacuumed it out, and we've wiped it out with alcohol. So now we're going to start patching all the holes and any gaps that there are in here. And so we'll begin that patching. Then we'll sand it again, and once it's sanded again, then we'll take a more fine sander and then sand it. Well, it's a warm day in Southern California. We're going to hit about 92 today. So we're probably not going to do any epoxy work. It's just a little too warm for that. Especially since we're getting a bit of a later start. We had to go pick up marine plywood that we're going to need to put into the center of this entire Forebeam, so we went and picked that up this morning, and that means we're getting a little bit later start and the sun's up and it's getting warm. But I am going to go ahead and sand out all of the patchwork we did on the interior here and get that ready for our carbon fiber so we can epoxy that early in the morning one of these days. I'm not sure which one it'll be, but we'll do it early when it's still cool. And so I'm going to get to work on doing that right now. All right, well, here I am to pick up my Sicomin, and as you can see, I'm having to go through tons of paperwork because it's considered hazardous material now. So now I'm waiting to get my Sicomin delivered out to our trailer, which coming from in here. And they, of course, nickel and dime you all the way along. So $5, form processing fee, $55 because they would need to bring it out to that door to here. So crazy. Yeah, right up there. He's just giving you some room. Yeah, there'll be a flow bin coming next. So that is the hardener, but he's still got to bring the flow bin out now, which is the actual epoxy portion of it. So he's going to bring that out, and then he'll set that here and try to push it forward with this forklift. All right, here comes the flow bin full of Sicomin. That is a lot of epoxy. Well, that's a lot larger than I thought it was going to be. That thing's huge. It's a good thing I didn't build the air-conditioned container area to hold this yet. I wanted to get it first to see just how big this was. Well, this is a lot larger than I thought it was going to be.
Over here.
Perfect.
Good?
Yep.
Gracias.
Thank you so much. Now we got to strap it down and keep it from going anywhere. Thanks. What this is up top here is some unidirectional fiberglass that was left out of my shipment by mistake. They handled it pretty well. They sent me some to get working by air so that it got to my build site really quickly, and then they sent the rest of it that I didn't need right now later. So they handled that very well, so it's all good. But here's the rest of it. So now I have all of the fiberglass to finish, and of course all of this crazy amount of epoxy here. SR 1280 epoxy resin from Sicomin. Finally got it 7 months later, but it's here and in time to keep us on track and on time for building SV Lynx. So we've got about an hour ride to get this back to where I'm storing it. And so Brian, my good friend here, who's loaned me the trailer and drove his truck out to pick this stuff up, is going to strap these two together first, and then we'll strap it down over the top as well and get this very secured, because after waiting this many months, we don't want this thing going anywhere. Okay, we're all strapped down. Should be safe for the trip back to San Dimas and the house where I'm going to store it, near the boat lot. We have made our Sicomin home. We've got our flow barrel in the garage. We haven't got our heat structure built around it yet, but we got it in there, and we've left enough room to build the structure around it. So we've constructed our foam enclosure here. And so we got the flow bin sitting back there, and we have our barrel of hardener for it and our barrel of West System 105 there, and our 206 flow hardener for the West System. And then these are just our portable ones that we take to the job site every day. And so there's room for all of that in there. The top isn't attached, I just have it weighted down, so we can take that off when we want to pump out of the flow bin inside. But if I just need to get to the barrels or the daily boxes, I just slide this out of the way. Use little weights to keep the foam pressed up against the rest of it. And that seals it all up. And then over here we have a small air conditioner set up, and that'll kick on every so often and keep the inside of this cool. So it has its own thermostat, so we set it at about 84 degrees. So anytime it gets higher than 84 degrees in there, this will kick on and cool it back down again. So there we go, our enclosure all made out of just foam, and that way it's just like a giant ice chest. And this doesn't actually come on all that often. Even in these 95, 98 degree days, it stays pretty cool inside. So, and I put a secondary thermostat in the inside that I can check to make sure this is working, and it has kept it at around 84 degrees most of the time. So we're all good. Hey everybody, as you can see, we've got our finished refrigeration unit for that giant ice chest for our epoxy sitting behind us. And so we thought we would take this opportunity, now that that's all done, to answer a few of the viewer questions that have come along, not just in this week's video, but in several of our videos. So I'm going to read a couple of the questions, and Marianne will take some of them, and I'll take some of them. Let's see. The first one is actually two different users have asked similar questions. The first one asked, another YouTuber used mooring line rope soaked in epoxy, and what he's talking about is using that where we put in the epoxy and fiberglass rope along the edges of our bulkheads. And then another user asked us, similar, he said, this rope idea for beefing up the big panel's edges is a lot of work. In my opinion, seems a bit tacky from an engineering perspective. So here's a question. Why couldn't you use a dimensionally suitable real rope instead and simply saturate it with epoxy before jamming it into those panel cavities? Okay, so these are similar questions using rope instead of rolled up fiberglass with epoxy. And the simple answer here is those might work. The rope idea, who knows? It could work, and we're not saying it wouldn't. But there's really a simple thing for this. The engineers over at Schionning have designed this boat and the strengths of the boat and all the panels and everything based on using rolled up fiberglass and epoxy. And we are just afraid completely to experiment and go away from the engineering that they have already worked out. So we really need to stick with what Schionning has asked us to do to make this boat strong, because in this particular case, we know it works, where in the other case, we're not positive it does. So we just have to stick with what's tried and true. And this is the way it's done on many different boat kits that have foam panels or do-it-yourselfers or any of that, is using rolled up epoxy fiberglass. So we're going to stick with the tried and true method on this one, although we're not saying it wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. We have a related question here. Maybe Marianne could take this one.
Yeah.
Do the bulkheads really stiffen up after the rope? So once we put that rope into those bulkheads, does it really stiffen up the panels?
Absolutely. The rolled up fiberglass with epoxy on it, once it hardens, it is super hard and stiff. It's kind of like rebar. So it really adds the stiffness to it.
Yep, and a lot of strength to those as well. All right, what else do we have? Another user, Daniel, says, I have a nightmare every time I see peel ply. And then he asks, have you ever left peel ply not removed, but done taping corners already? Well, sadly,
yes.
we have.
Yes, our very first attempt at using it.
Yes, we left it on a biscuit. And although that doesn't sound too bad, it was a long biscuit. And we chopped that biscuited panel into strips for the hull. So that meant it wasn't just one biscuit we did wrong. After we chopped it up, it was 50. So we had to fix each of the individual little boards. And if you've watched the previous videos, you saw us endlessly fixing those things. So that was a somewhat costly mistake. Now, it didn't cost us a ton of time because we fixed those little biscuits each time we were waiting for a strip to epoxy to cure, and we had time anyway, so we just fixed them at that time. But still, It was a stupid mistake, and we won't be doing that again.
No.
How are you two dealing with the extreme temperatures?
Well, it has now gotten really hot here, so what we've done is shift our hours to earlier in the day when it's cooler, and so when we're at the lot, we do epoxy work early, and then as it warms up that we can't work with the epoxy anymore, then we're doing stuff like sanding, and then we end our day a little bit earlier, and we head to the beach.
Yeah, if it's too hot, it's always good at the beach because it's about 15 degrees cooler down there. So, you know, if it's 100 here, it's 85 down at the beach. So that's always an option. Oh, about our router. We've designed that 3D router add-on that allows us to core out the foam. And Derek asked us, if you only have one arm on your router, you can do corners. I think it's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Derek, that idea really won't work. And to give you a little demonstration of that, I'm going to show you a little 3D model here. But what the problem is that it's the two arms that stick out really don't have anything to do with going around the corner. And whether there's one arm or two arms, it just doesn't matter, because it's the plate on front of the router that is causing it to not be able to make it around that corner, not the arms that stick out. And as you can see here in this 3D model as I show you that. So unfortunately, although we would appreciate it if it did work with one arm, and I would go ahead and 3D print that up, it just doesn't fix the problem, so we won't be going with that. All right, well, thanks for the suggestion. All right, well, Brad asked, I like the helm setup, but why starboard and not port?
Well, it's really a matter of preference. It could be on either side, but if you flip it to the other side, then you have to conversely flip the...
Everything in the salon and everything in the cockpit. So all of it, galley, tables, everything have to flip. Now, that's not a problem. The thing is that you could have it, if you want to build a 1520, on either side. And you can put the galley on the other side, and you can do all of that. It's not really a problem. So why did we choose to put it on the starboard side? Well, we don't actually have a great reason for it. It's a simple reason. In the past, we were looking at some production boats that we were thinking about buying, and it was on the starboard side. And we just got used to that because those were the boats we were looking at. Yeah. So when it came to design ours, we put it over on the right-hand side. We could have just as easily put it on the port, but I don't believe it really makes any big difference because you're going to come in to just as many docks and such that you need to be on the port side.
Yeah, so it's just more familiar to us.
So yeah, you can have it any way you want though, and it would be just as good.
Yeah.
We have somebody who, when we were putting together bulkhead number 4, it had those little arms that extend out. And he said, that little piece you biscuited on doesn't look true and straight. Well, it is, but the thing is that arm isn't true and straight. It's not meant to be. Where it comes out, where it attaches, it goes straight for a short bit, but then it cants down just slightly and comes down. So in the video, you'd be looking at it and you might see that it looks like it's not straight, but it's exactly mounted as it's meant to be mounted. So it is correct. All right, maybe both Marianne and I will get some of this one. Using the Excel file you linked, it's impossible to reach certain outcomes. For example, there's no set of priorities that will get you a higher score for tillers than stern fixed wheels. And dual semi-raised split helm will nearly always come out on top because it matches nearly all the positive categories. So maybe you can handle the tiller one.
So the fact is that the tiller helm position doesn't have as many positive factors that some of the other positions do, so it's kind of hard to make it come out that way.
Yeah, we just put all the things that we could think of as positives, and we didn't really try to make it so that one of these helm positions could come out better or worse than the others. We just let the chips fall as they may, and the truth is that the tiller option doesn't have as many of those positives. But if you can think of other positives that we didn't, send them to us, we'll add them to the spreadsheet. But the fact is, as it stands, and the ones we came up with, it's just not possible for that tiller to get that many because it just doesn't have that many positives on our list. And in fact, just to go with that point, if you look at all the production catamarans being made out there, none of them are offering a tiller-only catamaran because it just doesn't have as many positive things. Now, on the second part of this, he says the dual semi-raised split helm will nearly always come out on top. Well, that's sort of the exact opposite. It just does have so many positives that it comes out on top quite a bit because it just has a lot of positive things about it. But I just want to say, it's really important to note that if you like tillers and that's what you want on your boat, this list means nothing. Because the most important thing is if you're happy with your helm. If that's what you're happy with, then that's the best helm for you. And we aren't trying to talk you out of that. We just are listing a bunch of positive things and a bunch of helm positions and seeing which has which in it. And that's just a quick way of doing that. However, I will make one modification to the spreadsheet that you can use that will allow you to control a little bit more about if you want to make one of these come out higher. I will put in an option to put 0 instead of 1, 2, or 3 points for some of the positives. So if that particular positive is of no interest to you, you can 0 it out, and that will make some of the other positions possibly rise up in the results. So it's the best we can do on that. But again, it wasn't our intention to make it so that any one of them could win. We just put a bunch of positives, put a bunch of helm positions, and let the chips fall. And so that's what we did on that.
And your preference is the biggest factor in where you would choose anyway. So.
Yeah, this list has no real bearing upon which helm position you should choose. It's just a fun thing to look and see what it might come up with based on what your preferences, not preferences, but what you think are the positive things on helms. But again, the choice of helm is very personal and you should pick the one that you like.
Absolutely.
In fact, Hans over here mentioned that on his boat that he's building right now, instead of steering wheels, he'll have vertical tillers 6 feet tall for leverage and the feel of force on the rudder. That's what he likes. And Hans, that's the best helm for you. And I'm glad you're making it for you because you're going to be happy with the helm you chose because that's what you like. So good for you. All right, here's one Marianne's going to pick to answer, I'm sure. Could you just store the epoxy in your house instead of the garage?
Well, no. Firstly, we don't want the mess or the possible spillage anywhere in the house.
That would be a disaster.
That would be bad.
And I have spilled epoxy right here while transferring it from a barrel into our container that we take to the lot.
And the second thing is that all of the containers that we have right now are very large and very heavy. I mean, it took the forklift just to get the one container into the garage. So there's no way we could get them in the house.
Yeah, imagine trying to drive a Bobcat in through the door carrying a 1,600-pound flow bin full of epoxy.
Negative.
Not going in there, not knocking a wall out.
No.
So unfortunately, no, this is much better.
Yes.
Let's see, a longtime commenter, Kirk, who I've mentioned in other videos, had a comment here. He had some kind words, great summary for all the options available out there on the helms. I like your setup. With one consideration could be in lieu of the dual throttles that we have, which we have throttles on both sides of the boat, one at the helm and one over on the port side, just a set of throttles over there for docking. And so he says in lieu of that, you could install a dock mate option, which is a remote control that you can carry around with you anywhere on the boat and control your 2 motors from that. Well,
yeah, that's definitely an option for some folks, and we did look at that.
Yep.
But the expense of that is just not in our budget.
Love the idea, and if DockMate wants to sponsor our channel and offer us one of theirs, we would love to have it. But right now, it's just way beyond our budget. So having the set of throttles permanently mounted over on the port side was literally only a few $100s to get that set up. So it was very inexpensive. Not as versatile, but it's something we could afford, and it will get us the ability to dock on either side of the boat. All right, now it's time for a correction. One of our viewers said, The Alibi 54, which is now bankrupt, is where Phil Berman from Balance got the inspiration for the Versa helm. Alibi is the first to have done the tilting helm, so they deserve credit. I looked it up, and you know what? He's right. And you know what? This won't be the last time that we're wrong about something, and we appreciate it when people point out when we don't have something right. And so, although Balance seems to infer that they were the first ones to do it, they weren't. And really, Alibi did it first, and Phil Berman got the idea from the Alibi catamarans to build the first helm. So they still are one of the first few to do it. And since they have done it, I would say that that's when it launched, and a lot of other people started also doing, including Schionning on the Solitaire 1490. It has that same style of dual position helm with this tilting arm. And we chose not to do that. We actually had to take it out of the design that came with the original 1490 when we created the 1520. We took that out. And it wasn't because it isn't good. That's not the point. It has some great advantages because it gives you two positions to steer from. Up high where you're looking out and the weather's nice, drop down and you're nice and low when the weather's poor. But in our case, we wanted a dedicated helm area that it was and it's something I didn't mention when we talked about helms, and I forgot, which is a separate space on the boat from other areas. So it's a place that you can go up and stand your watch completely away from everybody else, and if they're partying and doing other things and stuff and watching TVs and stuff, you can have this space that's away from people that you can go up to when you want and do that. And it can be a little social area too. More people can come up there with you, but still it's a separate area. And we really liked it. It's almost another room because once you go up there, it's large enough for several people. And when we drop down the enclosures and stuff, it's completely protected from all of the elements. And so it becomes another room on the boat. And we like that. And it's just our preference, and that's nothing to do with how good the other system is, but it's just our preference that we like that. And we like that so much that we decided to do that instead of the dual position helm. So we had to take that out and put in our own version of that. So that's what we did. All right, well, I think that's it for the questions we're going to take this week. But keep commenting, please. We read them all. We try to answer them all. We listen to all of them. That doesn't mean we do what you say, but we at least consider it. And we consider your suggestions, and if they're a suggestion that seems to make sense, then we do it. And if they are some reason that we have a different opinion or see something you didn't or whatever, then maybe we don't. But it doesn't matter. We still consider everything that is suggested. And so not only we like you putting the comments, but they're very helpful for us. They make us think. And so please keep commenting, and we will occasionally answer some of those on the videos, but I always answer them when they're posted. And I'll keep doing that as long as we can. As long as we have enough time to answer them, we'll keep answering them. Right now, no problem at all. So keep posting those comments and we'll keep answering them. And thank you to all of our patrons.
Yep.
We have a new one this week. And don't forget, we're going to soon start engraving the patron names in the table. Why aren't we showing you that? We don't have the table. I have given all of that Western red cedar over to my friend Terry, who has his wood workshop, and I've told him to get his butt in gear and get the tables made so that we can start engraving the various names of our patrons and the people who worked on this boat and helped in any of those ways. So if you have the means and you would like to become one of our patrons, please do so, and you'll get your name engraved in the table once we have them.
We very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep.
And, well, that's about it for this week. So thank you again for watching.
Thank you. And don't forget to like and subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified of our next video.
And next week, we're going to try our hardest
Yeah.
to finish the forebeam completely. And so we can get it off those pads where we need to move that other hull over soon, because we have that Sicomin and we can start doing the basalt and laminating it soon. How soon? Well, that depends on the weather.
The weather.
Because right now it's too hot to do that much epoxy work in that day. So we got to wait till the weather drops, the temperatures drop down a little bit. So for the next week or two, we probably won't get to that, but I'm hoping that we'll get down into the high 80s or so, and then it'll be possible early in the morning to get that done. And if you just heard that motor turning on right there, that was our air conditioner turning on for our
cold box.
Yeah, keep our cool box and all of our epoxy in there. Cool. So it's working. See you next week.
Bye.